welcome back to Otaku No Video. As always, thank you very much for joining me for part 3 of my video digging deeper into the original Mobile Suit Gundam mecha anime TV series. And in this part, I'm going to talk about several of the major characters in Gundam and how they're portrayed and how they grow or don't grow or whatever as the case may be over the course of the series. Starting with Kai Shiden. This may surprise some of you, but I think Kai is really representative of the kind of slow but steady character development that you see in original Gundam. Kai starts off as a complete jerk and a twerp as well. He doesn't want to fight, doesn't want to do any of this stuff. And not only does he kind of fall apart in battle, although he does manage to be more than a complete waste of space, he's terrible for morale. I mean, he's constantly tearing other people down and just being a real wet blanket at the absolute least while back on White Base. And then over the course of the series, he changes. As I mentioned earlier, one of my favorite moments is when, during the Battle of Aboaku at the very end, White Base is, crash landing, and Kai and Hayato grab machine guns and go off and start defending White Base. And it doesn't seem odd. For a character that started so resistant to any of this stuff, to suddenly be defending White Base, and it just seems normal, because of how slowly he's been changing over the course of the series. Of course, there is the episode with the red-headed spy girl that really shows Kai the stakes of this whole thing, and how this whole conflict, how Zeon has really warped a lot of people, and just really what's going on, how, ending this war can have tremendous effects on so many people. So, good on Gundam for having a character like that. It's really pretty unlikable for a lot of this. I know some people like Kai, and by unlikable, I mean you wouldn't want to work with Kai. You wouldn't want to spend a lot of time around Kai. He's just so negative. And he turns into this wonderful character. Same thing with Hayato, actually. A character who is unlike Kai, but also sweating bullets in that first fight. Hayato certainly has a feeling of responsibility, though, and he has that core sense that he needs to do what needs to be done, that is there throughout the entire thing. And you see that not simply grow, but you see that mature over the course of the series, where Hayato at the end is much more comfortable in his skin, much more comfortable with what he's doing. He's not as withdrawn as he is at the beginning of the series. He's much more confident by the end of the series. One of the interesting things about Gundam in general is that one of the themes is that war is just horrible and needs to be stopped. And yet war is a very important source of maturation for so many of its characters. This is ironic, and one of the nice things about Gundam is that it admits that. I mean, that's just part of what happens. Everything that happens to us does change us. So, cool. Then, of course, there's Bright. And Bright is one of the poster children for someone who changes over the course of Gundam. I mean, at the beginning, he is just like, I give the orders, and you carry them out. Why isn't this working? What's going on here? Well, because it doesn't work that way. And yet there are millions of people who become managers who fall into the same trap. And not because they're stupid, but because we're led to believe that that's just the way it works. And it's not. It's a lot more complicated than that. Which Bright learns over the course of the series. By the end of Gundam, he's a very effective leader. And the characters are proud to fight under Bright Noah, which is, again, quite an impressive change. And you see that more in later Gundam series as well, where Bright has that sense of authority of command that people just respect greatly. And you see how Bright comes to that through experience. When he first starts, he knows the chain of command, he knows how everything is supposed to work, but without actually being out there in combat, without actually having some experience knowing how to deal with people, he's a pretty darn poor commander. But then it comes through that experience. And so Bright turns from this whippersnapper into maybe not a seasoned battle commander, but someone that you look at and you're like, I wouldn't mind having him as the leader of my squad, or what have you, if I were in combat. And there's Mirai, and I want to bring Mirai in because it's easy in any story to try to make your characters have as much conflict as possible, have them bouncing off each other as much as you can. Mirai doesn't do that, and Mirai is the calm in the storm. She is the one who has her head screwed on straight and who serves as this stabilizing influence on the other characters. She's the one that they kind of look to say, okay, look, are we completely off base here? Are we going crazy? And she can offer her opinion, and we can kind of trust that viewpoint. And it's wonderful seeing, the brilliance of the creators of Gundam saying, okay, we need somebody who's not screaming at everyone all the time. We need someone that's just stable, that we can see and kind of breathe a sigh of relief. Great idea for a character. And very important in those scenes where folks are arguing. You can see someone who says, well, this person has a point, whatever. So moving on from those characters to the bad guys, quote unquote, starting with Garma Zabi. Now, Garma starts off being portrayed as a bit of a fop. He's pretty incompetent. He's thrown off into this out-of-the-way position. There's no real danger. He seems to think he's very important and all these sorts of things. And then, of course, he dies. And what happens in that death? Think about that. Here's a character who is kind of... he certainly thinks that he's the bee's knees. No one respects him, really. And he's betrayed by his best friend. And at the end, what does he do? He takes control of that ship and he runs her in. He does what needs to be done at the last. And that happens right as we're realizing that there's far more going on with Char than we thought. And it highlights what Char has done. It shows us that Char has done something really bad here. And that, Garma was seen as a bit of an idiot, but then Garma never really had a chance to prove himself. And he only has that chance in the last few seconds of his life. And he does step up to the plate in his own way. And it's a brilliant juxtaposition of having this character that you're kind of laughing at throughout the entire series. In that final moment, he stands up. And Char, who you've been respecting for this entire sequence, he's laughing at this guy's death. Someone that he palled around with. Wow, what a sequence. And of course, I can't mention Garma and Garma's death without talking about Gihren Zabi. Now, Gihren's not particularly hard to understand, although a couple of things there. One, and the novels deal with this a lot more. You go into Gihren's mind a little bit and you realize that Gihren is basically a patriot. He believes in the ideals of Zeon. He believes that man needs to leave Earth and go to space. The Earth Federation is trotting down on the space noids, and this needs to stop. And if a big bloody war is what has to happen, then fine. And the problem with Gihren is that he has no sense of proportion, frankly. And he does lots of evil things. He doesn't really have much of a moral compass. And so he is a simple character. But that doesn't mean that he has no beliefs. He just has kind of evil beliefs, if you will. And it's tempting in a series like this, we got lots of characters with a fair amount of stuff going on among them. It's tempting to try to make all of your characters complex. And actually, Hayao Miyazaki's talked about this. He has this theory of action storytelling, where when he was doing Castle Cagliostro and Castle in the Sky and movies like that, he said he quickly found this significant limitation, namely, you can either make your bad guy complexly motivated, in which case you spend half of the movie establishing that. It just takes a while to establish everything that's going on. Or your bad guys are Nazis. Those are really kind of your choices. And so Giran's a Nazi. In fact, his father calls him a petty Hitler. And it's very accurate. And I think it was very smart of the creators of Gundam to pick their battles and say, okay, Giran is our big bad guy, and he's just going to be a much more simplistic bad guy. Not just, haha, I am evil, but someone whose motivations are a little more clear. And who is honestly going for a power grab. I mean, that's pretty darn obvious. So simple, but deliberately simple. And a worthy adversary for that. Because the nice thing about Giran is he's not stupid. He does some very smart, devious, evil, but smart things over the course of the story. Particularly what happens with Dozle, but I'll get to that in a bit. So you have Garma, you have Giran, of course, you've got to talk a bit about Degwin. Now, note how with Garma, we get his noble moment at the end. With Degwin, we've seen moments here and there with Degwin, you know. And then Degwin, I'm getting my names mixed up, aren't I? Degwin or Dozle. I always get those two mixed up. Anyway, the big guy. And I don't have the faces sketch out there. Anyway, the big brother. He's got a big. This is the problem with making these videos: is that eventually I get something mixed up while making a video, and it's either okay, I go back and re-record it from scratch, in which case it's not as good because it's not as whatever. Anyway, sorry. So he's definitely a bit of a lunkhead, but when the time comes for him to step onto the stage, we see him with his family. And we realize this is what he's protecting, is his wife and his daughter, and his country. He's very noble for that. Now, he kind of goes overboard. Again, no sense of proportion, really. Just much like his brother. But here you have a character who is really firmly committed to what he's trying to do, and is noble in his own way. To try to protect his wife and his daughter, which he succeeds at. Although that would cause him a lot of problems later for the various characters of Universal Century, but that's a whole nother video. And of course, Cassilia, the final of the siblings, the coiled serpent of the Zabis, the one who has been standing back, not getting involved, not doing anything, and then the moment that she sees that Giran has gone too far into patricide, pulls out her gun and bang, kills Giran outright in front of a group of people. And again, that's kind of shocking, coming from a character who has just been in the background the whole time. But this is her brother, and this is her father. It makes sense. It totally works. And it's a shocking moment when this terrible, seemingly unstoppable guy is shot by his own sister, because he doesn't realize that some people are going to realize he's gone too far. So Cassilia turns into this tragically noble character who kills the despot, you know, and gets a bazooka in the face for her troubles. But, you know, whatever. I mean, none of the Zabis are particularly admirable. I'm not saying that the Zabis are people that we respect and admire. But they have noble qualities. And again, remember, this is 1979 when this was made. Think of mecha anime from the 70s, if you've seen any of it. You know, the bad guys are evil lizard men from the planet Zargon. It's incredibly simplistic. You know, unless it was Captain Harlock or Galaxy Express 999 or Yamato or things like that, you're talking, and those aren't mecha, you're talking really simple things. Sometimes it's a little more complicated, but the good-bad guy split is pretty darn direct. You know, there's almost nothing good about the bad guys. There's basically nothing good about the bad guys in those shows. So having these characters, a character like Cassilia, who is biding her time and then ends up doing this, is just stunning. It's night and day compared to what came before. And then finally, of course, you have the father of the family, who I found very interesting. Because here's the guy who's running Zeon. You know, the evil emperor of the lizard men from the planet Zargon. And he's this old, frail, overweight guy who was in this very unique, just the right place, just the right time situation back with Zeonzum Daikun, and who grabbed for power. He had the opportunity and he took it. He certainly made some bad choices. He certainly did some wrong things in his life. And he's sitting here with everything that he's built, and he's seeing that it's falling apart. He has 4 conniving kids, and he sees that Zeon probably isn't going to be able to survive this war. And he sees how empty it all is. He sees that probably the next person in line is Giran of all people. Oh, God. And so finally he decides enough is enough. I'm going to go and I'm going to have peace break out. I'm going to stop all this. And I'm just going to go for peace. And what does he get for that? His own son murders him. That's his reward. I do feel bad for him. And yes, he did lots of bad things. But at the same time, you look at this and you look at a contrite old man, someone who has realized through experience that this was just not the right direction, and who tries to make it right and completely fails. Really through no fault of his own. Now, granted, I mean, he did probably raise Giran and the others, but still. Wow. And again, compare this to what came before. Gosh. Okay, so let's talk about some of the other bad guys. Ramba Ral. Everybody loves Ramba Ral. Ramba Ral is awesome. Why? Because Ramba Ral is an excellent leader. He gets in with his troops. He is masterful in understanding his enemy. And he's a nice guy, genuinely. We first meet him face to face in that little cantina in the desert with Amuro, and Ramba's very nice to everybody. He's a normal guy. He's a dude, you know? And I'm listening to some podcasts about ancient Rome, and I'm talking the Roman Republic, like before the Empire, the Republic that the Empire grew out of. And one of the most popular and most successful generals in the Roman army was one who got down in the trenches with his men and who was willing to dig a trench if he needed to, or help, you know, he would help out. Now, he wouldn't do that if there were other things to be done, you know, he was cognizant of his time, but he was a dude, and his army was one of the most effective of his era, probably the most effective of his era. That was Ramba Ral. And this is a bad guy. And you think, this is a guy who likes Amuro, and when they meet in battle, Ramba Ral's ticked off at Amuro, not because he thinks Amuro is a bad person, but because Ramba Ral recognizes the opportunity that lies in the Gundam. Ramba Ral realizes here is somebody with the skills and with the equipment to do amazing things, and he's resisting it every step of the way. So Ramba is ticked off at Amuro for that reason, because Amuro is not taking advantage of this opportunity. Again, amazing from a bad guy. And you have somebody who is a great pilot, great leader, all these very things, and he is a middle-aged, pot-bellied guy. You know, this is not the picture of someone who, balding. Man, what a brilliant choice for one of these other characters. And he's someone who establishes what Zeon is and what Zeon stands for. The fact that people aren't fighting for Giran Zabi. They're not fighting for any of the Zabi family. They're fighting for Zeon and what Zeon represents in its noblest sense. Brilliant idea. Finally, I want to talk about the 3 star-crossed lovers of Gundam, starting with Lala Soon. Lala's interesting because she is being literally patronized by Char. Char found her at some point, recognized her new type powers, pulled her out of that. And there are hints. I'm not sure, because I probably haven't just stumbled across these bits of Gundam lore, but I've seen hints that Lala's situation was really bad. Things were not good for Lala Soon. And Char pulled her out of that, took her to the Flanagan Institute, started developing her new type powers. And she is kind of infatuated with Char. And he doesn't feel the same way about her. Which raises this question among some fans of, is that fair? I mean, Lala is lavishing all his attention on Char, and Char clearly respects her and likes her and enjoys spending time with her and certainly feels for her. But there's a clear disparity in their feelings. But the thing is, that's not Char's fault. You know? The fact that he doesn't love her as much as she loves him, not his fault. That's just what he feels. You know? He can't just manufacture that much love for her, if you will. So she's stuck in this place, and she knows it. She knows that Char doesn't feel the same way about her, and she's cool with that. And then, of course, she meets Amuro, and they fight, and Lala Soon dies. Now, there's a scene in the novel, and I don't recall if it's in the TV series. I haven't gone back and checked on this particular bit. There's a scene in the novel, though, where as she's dying, she cries out in shock and some despair, and says, "Ah, Amuro, I can see it now. I was supposed to meet you first. Cosmically speaking, if I had met you and not Char, wouldn't this have all worked out so much better? You know, for some reason, you know, you were walking down the street and you made a left instead of a right, and we never met. And that would have made all this make sense, or at least this chunk of it. You know, and it's not that they would have suddenly fallen madly in love with each other, but her connecting with Char caused all sorts of pain. And even further than that, I mean, this is the moment of Lala's death is the moment at which Char and Amuro part ways and cannot forgive each other. That's it. And the terrible thing is that that's not what Lala wanted. Lala would never have wanted Amuro and Char to have this death match for the next however many years. But that's the lesson they took out of her death. And it's this character who's just sort of tragically sitting there. And this happens all the time. It's not her fault that she feels the way she feels, or that Char feels the way she feels, or that things worked out the way they are. They just did. And Lala was the price of that situation. And then, of course, we have Char. And one could write volumes on Char. A very complex character. He has his own motivations, his own goals, his own things he's trying to achieve. And he moves through, well, the beginning and the end of the series. I mean, he's kind of not there for a good chunk of the middle. But he moves through the story with his own agenda and doing his own things. And again, it's amazing seeing a character who has so much going on himself and his own things he's trying to accomplish. And that he's also doing things for the plot. He's also pushing the plot along. He's there for that. And having this sort of third enemy in the series, that you have Federation and Zeon, and you have this whole Char equation, which makes things very different. And the fact that Char manages to accomplish his goal, you know, he kills off a fair chunk of the Zabi family. Good on you, I suppose. And that brings me to Amuro, because think about this again. We got a mecha series. We got our hero, and we've got our bad guys. You know, the whole Zabi family. How many of those does Amuro manage to kill? Char takes out 2 of them. Cassilia takes out 1. Giran takes out 1. You know, Char takes out as many as the Zabis do themselves. You know, Amuro doesn't really manage to defeat the bad guys in that sense. Indeed, that whole final battle is with Char. Now, granted, Char is fighting for the Zeon, kind of. But that's really a shocking difference than your typical mecha, or your typical just story, where your hero is his job is a military one. This is the story of a military conflict. It's not simply about the main character's issues. There's a war to be won. And so the ending chooses to focus on that conflict between those two characters and the war that's going on and those larger problems. And it's great seeing an anime series, especially a mecha series, set during a war that doesn't lose sight of that. That doesn't turn into, oh, there's this big battle going on, but the characters just have to worry about, this tiny little thing. Nope. That's amazing. And of course, throughout all of this, Amuro has been changing. He starts out, it's amazing. I went back and I rewatched the first episode of Mobile Suit Gundam recently. In that first episode, Amuro, our first moment with our hero, he's hunched over an engineering desk saying, "Go away, Frau. I don't want to deal with you. Leave me alone." 2/3 of the way through the series, he's standing in front of a bunch of people giving a military briefing about new technology. And we see this evolution of character. How someone who started completely self-absorbed. And what's also interesting, and this is one of the neat things that Gundam can do, is give us some contrasts. There's a sequence later on where, if I'm recalling it correctly, Amuro is working on the Gundam, and he's so self-absorbed in that, or so absorbed in that, not self-absorbed, that he's forgotten to eat, and Frau has to bring him some food. And it's a clear contrast to that first episode where he was forgetting to eat and he was working. But there's a key difference. Later on, Amuro is absorbed in something that is helping other people. Something that is important for what's going on around him. Earlier on, he's absorbed in himself and his own little projects, and he's shut off the rest of the world. Now, he's doing something for the rest of the world. He has purpose. And that's nothing against play and experimentation that Amuro is doing. I mean, he was an adolescent, playing. That's fine. But the point is, now he's found something that's important. And the weird thing is watching that sequence and realizing that sequence later on, realizing that feels right to be absorbed in that because it has purpose. So Amuro turns from this whiny, self-absorbed adolescent into somebody aware of what's going on around him and the overall problems, and someone who has taken his skills and the situation he's in and applied those skills. And as I think I mentioned before, in earlier episodes, it's important to recognize that one of the core messages of Gundam is that it was Amuro's responsibility to use those skills in that situation, even if he didn't want to. Because he was there and it had to be done. It's a lesson we don't often get. That, you may have the freedom to do whatever you want to do, but that's not really right sometimes. Sometimes you have to say, look, I don't want to do it. But I'm here. And I can, and so I will. What's also amazing about all this is realizing that I'm just scratching the surface on all these characters. I mean, I'm sure folks will add comments on this about their favorite characters and scenes and so forth. I'm just talking about the major themes, the most memorable scenes, the major characters. And this is the third part of a series that's been going on for about an hour. That's how much there is in Mobile Suit Gundam. That's how different it is from everything that came before. And that's why Mobile Suit Gundam has stood the test of time. Because so much has been packed into it, but done so in a way that is still entertaining and still understandable, and just does so much at a time when folks were doing nothing, frankly, or very little. So those are my thoughts on Mobile Suit Gundam. I hope you enjoyed it. Please stop by streamsuki.com if you're looking for online streams of Mobile Suit Gundam. Gundam is often available streaming legally, and Streamsuki will find it and take you there. And if you want to talk about Mobile Suit Gundam and other interesting anime like that, please stop by otakunovideo.net, where we have a forum and other ways where you can talk to us about, and talk to me about, cool series. So, hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Please feel free to email me or leave comments about Gundam and your thoughts on this, and I'll be happy to perhaps make more videos about some of the other aspects of Gundam, because there's so much there. Thank you very much for sticking in there and watching all these 3 videos. Take care.